wanting to maximize your time, but also not wanting to run yourself ragged. It's one of those age-old mysteries. How do you balance the two? And I'm not going to give you standard time management tips because I want to approach productivity in a more sustainable, healthy way. So here are a few kind of counterintuitive or not so common adjustments that I have made over the years that have really helped me to get big results, to maximize my time without adding stress to my life. Let's go. Hey, how's it going? It's Laura, and if you're like me, you've probably already watched a bunch of videos on doing more and being faster. You've likely heard the same tips over and over again. And you might hear some of those in this video, but for the most part, I will be covering lesser known or completely unheard of techniques that have been really powerful for me when it comes to being intentional and making my time count. Starting with the one I learned most recently. I was out walking the dog one morning and it was one of those days where I had a lot on my plate. I had an appointment, I had to buy birthday gifts, I had a bunch of work to do, I had overdue work that I had to catch up on. And I kept thinking of more and more things to add to my list. So I'm out walking the dog and I'm practically running. Like I am rushing to get back so I could dive into my list. I'm just like, go, go, go. I am sweating. My heart is racing. The blood is pumping. My brain is racing. And I'm impatient with the dog because she just wants to, stop and sniff things. And I'm like, well, we don't have time for that. And so I realized something that had been slowly dawning on me for the preceding few weeks. But that is that if I want to get stuff done, I need to slow down, like physically slow down. Because when I physically rush, my brain and my mind races too. I end up making mistakes, having to redo things, because I'm rushing through and not giving them any thought. I become really frazzled and frustrated, and that sometimes causes me to just like railroad through things, just plow through them as quickly as possible. To rush through a project just to get it done and end up doing a lot more harm than good. I alienate or isolate other people, people who could potentially help me because I'm frustrated, because I start snapping at people. I burn out pretty quickly because my frantic energy just completely depletes my tank. And I just end up doing things badly or doing things that don't even need to be done at all, purely because I was in such a rush and a race to get things done that I didn't stop to think things through or think do I actually even need to do this? I hadn't stopped to reflect on anything, to think things through before moving on. I find that the days I'm rushing are often the days where the universe steps in and kind of forces me to slow down. So for example, I will be rushing and racing to fill the dishwasher as quickly as I can so that I can move on to the next task. But that is inevitably the day that I drop a glass, something smashes, and then I have to spend extra time cleaning that up. So these days I have to purposely slow down my physical actions, like my movements, so that my brain can slow down and I actually have time to do things with care and attention. So in moments of high stress or just busyness, try slowing down, like physically slowing down, walk a little slower, breathe a little deeper, and it should help you to reset and refocus. Now, I know you've all heard the typical task batching advice. I've given it, and it is good advice, but this time I want to suggest a little spin on it. So I spent some time over the summer traveling to various different places for different reasons. I was in Palm Springs for a conference, I was in Michigan meeting up with a friend, I was in Connecticut visiting my in-laws, and I was home in Ireland for a wedding. Now, I don't normally suffer from jet lag, but when I got back from Ireland, I was wiped. I mean, barely able to function. But the thing is, it went on for weeks. My energy levels were almost non-existent for nearly 2 months. So I started batching unrelated tasks to keep my mind fresh. Batching, related or similar tasks is great when you want to get into a flow, when you want to be quick and efficient and you're just churning things out, kind of like a factory line, you get into that groove. But also, like a factory line, too much repetition can lead to fatigue. I was starting from scratch with almost no concentration levels, so it was totally pointless for me to try to force myself to focus on something for long periods of time. So I switched things up every now and again to keep things interesting, to keep my brain fresh and engaged. And I also tried to give myself a milestone, something that was, pretty quick that I could achieve, so that I could get that sense of accomplishment that would give me like a little boost of motivation. But also it meant that I could pause at kind of a natural checkpoint, like a natural pausing point. One of the biggest downsides of switching tasks is that it can take you a while to kind of like get back into a task, to get your brain on track again. But what I started doing was things like, responding to a few emails and then stopping and moving on to a different task, like reading a chapter of my book, and then stopping and moving on to a different task, like putting on a load of laundry. And what that helped me to do was to feel like I had achieved something, that I had actually got something done, but also that I could then switch tasks, keep my brain engaged, but at a natural kind of stopping point. So I didn't, when I went back to finish off the task or read another chapter or answer some more emails, I didn't have to waste mental energy trying to reorient myself. It was a natural pause point, and I was able to easily pick back up the task later on. I will say though, it was important to me to plan those things out in advance rather than wasting the mental energy in the moment of trying to figure out what I should do next. I needed to use basically as little brain power as possible when it came to just getting things done. I also just generally find it easier to stay on top of my priorities when I can see them all laid out, when they're written down somewhere. That's why I ended up creating my own digital planner. It is specifically designed to just simplify and organize my life. But I find in general planning, knowing what I'm supposed to be doing, really helps to keep me on track. Speaking of emails, I used to reply to every single one I received. I get a lot of brands, reaching out wanting me to promote their products, and a lot of them are terrible or they're just not a good fit for me. So I used to reply and politely decline, and then I made it more efficient by creating a canned response, so just a template. Basically at the click of a button, it just said thanks but no thanks. And eventually I realized I didn't have to waste my time at all. Some brands just send out mass emails. Like I get a lot about video games, for example. So now I just delete them, or better yet, if I see the same one popping up multiple times, I will create a filter where any email with the name of, that particular game or that particular company just gets automatically deleted, sent off into outer space. I don't know. Don't do what you don't have to do. Don't deal with what you don't have to deal with. Let me give you a really silly example. So recently I got a comment from somebody who watches my daily vlogs that I post over on Instagram. Hi Sinead. She wondered why I never cut my sandwiches. It's just one of those things that I don't have to do, so I don't do it. Now look, I know that's only saving me like mere seconds, but there are other things that I also don't do, like responding to every email. I just don't have to spend my time on that stuff, and there are things that you do not have to spend your time on. So for everything on your list, or even just randomly throughout the day before you dive into another task, just pause for a moment and ask yourself, do I really need to do this thing? Like, what is the worst that could happen if I just don't do it? I'll admit that this can sometimes be difficult in the moment, but I find that hindsight obviously is a great teacher. So every now and again I will sit down with my planner and I will look back over the things that I did and just ask myself, was that worth doing? Like, did that prove fruitful? Or did it really lead nowhere? And then I will use that to inform my future planning sessions. Cut out as much as you can and stop cutting your sandwiches. Okay, so you've paused before your next task. You've asked yourself if you really need to do it, but what if the answer is yes? I have often made lists for myself that just do not work with my natural instincts. You know, here's me thinking that, oh yeah, I'll do a whole bunch of meetings back to back, you know, like that batching thing that we talked about, completely forgetting that as an introvert, that will be the death of me. I am not built for that. And then there are other times when I think, oh, of course I can tackle this task on that day, you know, and then something happens and I would rather do anything else when the time comes. Or I dive into something and I'm pushing and pushing and just wondering why I'm not making progress, why it feels so difficult. This is where a kind of pre-work check-in comes in really handy. Before planning out my day, or even just before diving into a new task, I slow down. Like we talked about, I take that pause, I ask myself if I actually need to do a certain task, and then I just kind of check in with myself. Like, do I feel calm right now? Do I have enough energy to tackle this task right now? Are my concentration levels where they need to be for this job? Are there any distractions that are going to make my life more difficult? Just like when we were talking about slowing down, if I dive into a task just on autopilot without thinking, I might end up doing the wrong thing or pushing through or just making it more difficult for myself than it really needs to be. Maybe I could move things around so that that task gets pushed back to a later time, and right now I can focus on a different task that is more aligned with my current energy and concentration levels. Or let's say I've planned out a day that I know is going to require a huge amount of mental energy, and then I wake up that morning and I just don't have it in me. I pivot. I ask myself what I need, you know, what can I do, what can I not do, and then I adjust accordingly. That is why I prefer digital planning. You know, I used to be a big paper planner, but I could not stand the fact that I would have to like cross things out, you know, scribble them out, move them around. Hated all that. So with digital planning, I can easily erase things, easily delete them, easily move them around. No mess. With my own planner then, I can even move the pages around, or I can duplicate the pages if I need to. I have as much space as I need. I can choose and change my goals depending on how I feel, depending on how, you know, a situation has evolved. I can make sure that I'm adapting to different situations, different energy levels, and just really get the most out of my time without the overwhelm. Now this next one pains me. I fought against this one for so many years because it goes against my very nature, but unfortunately for me, the evidence is in its favor. It is overwhelming, so I have to concede defeat on this one. And, you know, I have to say, I've got so much better at it over the years. This video was actually a perfect example of it. Now, there are still some areas where I consciously choose to ignore it, but it is an intentional decision, not an automatic reaction. Years ago, when Sam and I first moved in together, we had, you know, friends and family who were coming to visit the new place, and I was furiously tidying and cleaning everything in sight. And when I was cleaning one closet that was in our home office, you know, in advance of someone's arrival, Sam asked me, "Why are you doing that? Like, she's not going to look in there." So I conceded, I gave up, and guess what? Wrong. She actually did look in there. And you would think that that would have kind of affirmed my perfectionist tendencies. But actually I realized I really didn't care. Now I don't even bat an eyelid when I tell that story. It's just an amusing anecdote, and the reality is she has probably never given that a second thought since. I have learned over the years to counter my perfectionist tendencies, my natural inclinations, and I've realized, you know, I've come to acknowledge that not every task needs 100% of my time and energy. I got comfortable, or at least more comfortable, with good enough, and it has been freeing. You know, how many times have you spent hours, days, maybe agonizing over something that nobody else even noticed. Or even if they did, they just didn't care about it nearly as much as you did. They didn't care nearly as much as you hoped or expected they would care. You know, it's like spending ages perfectly gift wrapping a present for a child. Deep cleaning your entire house just for someone to come over and sit at your kitchen table. In the grand scheme of things, no one but you is going to remember that you spent 5 hours trying to pick out the perfect font for that invitation. Investing less time and energy into the less important tasks frees up more focus for the actually important and meaningful stuff. I've talked about this next one a few times before, but it's honestly made one of the biggest differences in my life, and I never hear anyone else talking about it. But years ago, and I remember this so vividly, you know, I can laugh about it now and be like, what was I thinking? But I used to try to have a kind of rhythm and routine to my weeks. So same kinds of tasks on Mondays, same on Tuesdays, etc. And I still do that, and I do find it effective. I guess maybe that's a little bonus tip for you. You know, getting into a good cadence lets your body and your brain know what to expect and just automatically prime themselves so the tasks become habits, second nature. But there was one specific thing that I did that was foolishness, pure foolishness. And I tried to push through for a few weeks before I finally realized what the problem was. I had one day where I wanted to record a video and write a newsletter. So those two big tasks on one day. They never got done because both of them were mentally demanding. Like as soon as I finished one, that was it. I was spent. Like I can tell you that as soon as I'm done recording this video, I'm done. Tapped out. Like mentally, I will be mush. Well, you see, basically you have two different types of batteries, if you will. You have your brain battery and you have your body battery. Your brain battery takes care of all of the mental and emotional tasks. Your body battery takes care of all of the physically demanding things. And just like you would check your phone's battery before going out for the day, you also need to check in with yourself, with your own battery levels, to see how you're doing before you dive into a task. Don't put all of your mentally draining tasks on the same day like I did, or you will quickly run out of charge. Instead, alternate your tasks between mentally demanding and physically demanding so that one of them, while you're focusing on one, the other can be recharging. Plan your weeks around it. Again, having a planner of any description, doesn't have to be mine, but any of them will help you to visualize the flow of your week. You want to align your tasks with how much energy you have left in your tank. So for me, if I have a social event, for example, I know that afterwards I will need a mental break. So I will either plan in some time to completely rest and recharge and do pretty much nothing, or I will do a task that is maybe a little bit more physically demanding, but where I can shut my brain off. So things like walking the dog or cleaning something. Things that are a lot less mentally taxing. But acknowledging and allowing for your different energy levels, your different energy types, helps you to plan your days that much better. It prevents burnout and it helps you to balance all of your tasks so that they're more manageable. It allows you to rest on your low energy days and also to pivot. Like if you find that one of your batteries is drained or is close to being empty, you can then switch things up and do another type of task. Acknowledging and allowing for your different energy levels just helps prevent burnout. It helps you to better manage your tasks, the different types of tasks that you have. It allows you to rest on your low energy days, but also to pivot on those days where you realize you don't have a certain energy to give to one thing. Instead, you can change and focus your attention elsewhere. You can take advantage of your other battery's power instead of having to completely shut down. If you're really into tracking things, you could also track your energy levels, to see if you can notice different patterns. So maybe over the course of a week, or during your menstrual cycle, or just after performing particular tasks. You can rate your energy levels to see how they are and how they fluctuate. Understanding those fluctuations, those natural ebbs and flows, is going to better help you to plan in future. When I did this, I was able to plot like exactly how my energy levels decline and dip as the week goes on, so that I was able to better plan future weeks. And there's one thing that kind of encapsulates everything. So without this, I probably wouldn't have been able to figure out any of the above, and you won't be able to find out what works for you. Remember when I talked about rushing and racing and diving into the next task kind of on autopilot, not taking a moment to check in with yourself? It can lead to all kinds of trouble. So there are some things on this list that I would have figured out a lot sooner if I had implemented this tip and been consistent with it. At the end of each day, I take a few minutes to just kind of reflect on what I accomplished that day, and I jot it down in my planner. It's why I created a specific section for it on the daily pages. So I ask myself, what was time well spent that day? What did I feel was worth doing? What was meaningful? What do I feel made a difference? And then I also look at, where I struggled and try to figure out why. And this isn't to beat myself up or anything, it's simply to try and figure out how I can better support myself in future. And then I also do a bigger review at the end of each month. So like with productivity videos, I didn't want to just have a planner where, you just crammed everything in, like it was simply about doing things. What it's really designed for is, like this video, being intentional, helping you to streamline and simplify. So if that's something you're looking for, it might help. So my reviews really help me to kind of reinforce what's working, what I find helpful, what my priorities are, what I want to continue doing. It makes it easier then in the future to focus on what are the priorities. It makes it easier to figure out where my time is best spent. And it identifies the things that I just don't need to do at all, so that I can stop wasting my time on them. Another thing is that a review allows me to see and appreciate the progress that I'm making, really stopping to celebrate and notice that progression. I can see how any changes I'm making are having an impact. It helps me to reflect and review and, maybe look at what I was working on last week and how that has impacted me in the current week. So some of the reflections, while they might be small, they can lead to really big insights, particularly over time, when you can start to see patterns and ways of doing things, and you can see kind of the results of the work that you're doing. I really find by taking this time to reflect, it helps me to actually build momentum, seeing those successes and seeing those patterns, seeing where I can improve, and that being very clear. It builds that momentum for me. It helps me to know what to focus on, and it helps me to maximize my time in the way that best suits me. And like I said, maximizing time isn't about squeezing in more tasks and activities. It's about working and living in a way that's intentional and sustainable. If you want some extra support to help you map out your simpler, more intentional life, something that will complement the tips in this video, you can learn more about my digital planner right here. But either way, I hope you found something in this video that will help to improve your life and how you're spending your time. Until next time, Gur have míle maith agam. Agus feici mé sibh sigalua. Slán!